Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has ended an historic visit to South Africa, signaling a dramatic improvement in the once strained relations between the two countries. The visit marked a diplomatic breakthrough for the Ukrainian leader in his efforts to counter Russia's influence in Africa. However, a Russian airstrike on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, forced the president to cut short the trip by returning home immediately after meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa. The South African leader said the visit had reaffirmed the bonds between the two nations, pointing out that Zelensky's visit was the first in 33 years by a Ukrainian head of state. At a joint press conference, President Ramaphosa said this particular visit reflects a shared commitment to enhancing bilateral relations between the two countries. According to him, South Africa has taken part in various talks around peace in Ukraine and is also backing a comprehensive ceasefire. Well, let's listen now to both leaders at the press conference.
Huge scandal yesterday. I remember some emotions seeping into the media on that, but emotions, well, they will remain emotions. Russia dislikes any union around Ukraine, because if Ukraine is alone, it will become a much easier target for Russia. Though, frankly speaking, for 3 years of this war, we've shown our big strength, and actually we are stronger than we were in the early days. Believe us, we are much stronger now, but probably it is us who want the most this war to stop. This is our sheer desire. And that was the starting point of our talk and meeting with President Ramaphosa. It was the primary consideration, how to stop this war, how to curse Russia for this comprehensive unconditional ceasefire.
The war manifests itself in many ways and at any time, and that is why we're calling for an end to this war. This is a war that has not only affected Russia or Ukraine, it has also affected a number of other countries. That is why the African Peace Initiative leaders went to Kyiv and Moscow to plead for war and to call on the leaders, to plead for the end of the war rather, and to call on the leaders to sit around the table and negotiate the end to this war. All wars do come to an end, and it depends at what stage they come to an end, and we say it should be sooner rather than later.
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is making this landmark visit to South Africa, a move that signals a major shift in relations between the two countries. Here's more from our correspondent, Innocent Samosa.
Africa is part of the BRICS group. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, many commentators here says that this gives the country a unique kind of access to Russia, which could eventually or possibly be helpful when it comes to peace talks. Now, recently, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been meeting with leaders from the US, the EU, and the UN, of course, trying to push for a ceasefire with Russia. Now, it goes without saying that his visit to South Africa right now is a big deal, especially since his relationship with the US. We do know that US is Ukraine's main military backer, has gone downhill since President Donald Trump took office in January. Now, Trump briefly paused military support and also called Zelensky what he called him a dictator, and even blamed Ukraine for starting the war. Now, for President Cyril Ramaphosa, Zelensky's visit also matters. Now, South Africa has been facing growing pressure from the Trump administration, and Ramaphosa sees this seems to view this visit as a chance to strengthen his image as a peacemaker. He said their talks would focus on finding what he called a path to peace. He also mentioned that he had a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of Zelensky's arrival. Now, increasingly, Trump hasn't made much of a fuss about South Africa's close ties with Russia, possibly because he also has a friendly relationship with Putin and has been urging Zelensky to, of course, strike a deal with him. What really put a strain on Trump's ties with South Africa is the country's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice and Trump's accusation about the so-called unjust and immoral practices, against the white Afrikaner minority, and of course something Ramaphosa's government strongly denies. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, protesters in Pretoria are condemning President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit, calling it a Western imperialist visit. Members of the opposition party Umkhonto weSizwe MK party were out on the streets under the rainy weather, singing and dancing and carrying placards criticizing the visit. Demonstrators say they are against the invitation of Mr. Zelensky, who according to them is a facilitator of NATO, especially when South Africa is a BRICS member nation.
Zelensky is not welcomed here because we don't want Western imperialists here. During the President Zuma's presidency, we joined BRICS. We are part of the BRICS plus countries. And as MK, we are not apologetic about it.
We are here to demonstrate that we are anti-Ramaphosa, inviting Zelensky to our country when he knows very well that South Africa is a member of BRICS. Now, for him to invite a man who has been associated and who is really a facilitator of NATO's agenda against Russia.
South Africa's headline consumer inflation has slowed for the first time in 5 months, easing to 2.7% in March from 3.2% in February. The decline was largely driven by lower food prices and softer fuel inflation. Changes in fuel prices significantly impacted the monthly inflation rate, with the fuel index dropping by 0.4% from February. On an annual basis, the fuel index also declined. Notably, the price of 95-octane petrol fell to 22.34 rands in March, down from 24.45 rands a year ago.
Rate for the hot beverages category declined slightly in March. It remains in double-digit territory at 14.4%. In fact, this category has witnessed double-digit inflation in all but 5 of the past 32 months since August 2022. Instant coffee and black tea drove much of the upward momentum in March, with instant coffee 18.8% and black tea 12.8% more expensive than a year ago. Alcoholic beverages also added pressure, with prices rising on average by 2.1% between February and March. This took the annual rate to 4.7% from 4.1% in February. Annual increases were recorded for wine, up 5.3%, beer, higher by 4.4%, and spirits and liqueurs, rising to 4.3%. Housing rents for the first quarter were surveyed in March. Actual rentals increased by 2.9% and earners equivalent rent by 2.4% compared with the fourth quarter of 2024.
In Tanzania, the country has banned all agricultural imports from South Africa and Malawi in the latest episode of a growing trade row. Tanzania's Agricultural Minister Hussein Bashi confirmed the move, adding that Tanzania is taking this step to protect business interests. South Africa has for years prohibited the entry of bananas from Tanzania. Malawi, which shares a border with the country, has also blocked imports of flour, rice, ginger, bananas and maize from its northern neighbor. Diplomatic efforts to resolve the long-running trade issues have so far failed, but Mr. Bashi says fresh talks are ongoing. South African exports to Tanzania of various fruits, including apples and grapes, will be hit. Meanwhile, landlocked Malawi, which has relied on Tanzanian ports to carry its exports, such as tobacco, sugar, and soybeans, to the rest of the world, will have to reroute its goods. Kenya's President William Ruto joined his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping at Beijing's Great Hall of the People to witness the signing of several trade agreements between both countries. President Ruto and President Xi oversaw various trade agreements being signed by their officials. A key highlight is a Memorandum of Understanding on the Blue Economy, Fisheries and Maritime Affairs, aligning Kenya with the WTO Fisheries Subsidies Agreement. This initiative is expected to create jobs and boost exports at a critical time for global trade, even as things continue to heat up with the US-China trade war. President Ruto is currently on a 4-day visit to Beijing, which began on Tuesday. It's his third visit in 2 years, previously traveling to China for the Third Belt and Road Forum in October 2023 and the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in September 2024. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwandan-backed M23 rebels have agreed to halt fighting in the east of the DRC until peace talks mediated by Qatar reach a conclusion. It is the latest truce deal since the rebels stepped up an offensive in eastern DR Congo, where authorities say 7,000 people have been killed since January. Both sides on Wednesday jointly announced to work towards peace following more than a week of talks, which they describe as frank and constructive. Well, last month, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and his Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame also reaffirmed their commitment to an unconditional ceasefire, and that was in a surprising meeting in Doha. The decades-long conflict has intensified since January, when M23 staged an unprecedented offensive, seizing the cities of Goma and Bukavu, the two largest cities in eastern Congo, and sparking fears of a wider regional war. Well, joining us now is our correspondent, Innocent Samosa. Hello, Innocent. I understand it's been a long day for you covering this visit. What more can you tell us about, the significance of this? It's the first of a Ukrainian president in 33 years to South Africa.
Well, indeed, colleague, a very good evening to you and our viewers around the world. It's good to be in your company. Like you rightly alluded to, an extraordinary time for these two countries. You would recall that previously South Africa and Ukraine had a little bit of misunderstanding, particularly because of South Africa's stance with the Ukraine-Russia war, where South Africa decided to take the non-alignment stance, where in a way, South Africa looked like indeed supporting Russia. But of course, the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, and President Cyril Ramaphosa met today. And of course, they told members of the media that some of the discussions were centered around issues of infrastructure, issues of energy, the issues around agriculture. You would know that Ukraine is rich in wheat. So those are some of the things that were discussed today. But also, they reminded us the fact that the two nations have a long-standing history. I mean, they've got around 33 years of diplomatic ties. And this is the first time where a Ukrainian president visit the continent. But from President Ramaphosa's view, we heard that the conversations were much alive today, and he mentioned also that the ministers that came with President Zelensky also had some time to discuss some of the issues that are at hand. But unfortunately, he had to cut his trip short. We do know, Layo, that he was supposed to basically meet with the Ukrainian civil society groups in South Africa. He was supposed to also meet with the student leadership in South Africa. Among others, he was supposed to deliver a lecture at the University of Pretoria, but he has to go back home since we heard that there is a bombing at the capital, Kyiv. So he had to cut his trip short. But from President Ramaphosa's view, the discussions were much alive, and he is happy that they have actually made sure that the relationship and bilateral ties are stronger than ever at this point in time. Layo?
Indeed, in a sense, and talking about those discussions focusing on the war, President Ramaphosa held a phone conversation, we know, with Russia's Putin ahead of Zelensky's visit, and we've seen South Africa play some sort of peacemaking role, which would not be the first time for this war. What more, according to, tell us more about what President Ramaphosa said and how South Africa is trying to, see an end to the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. So you would recall, colleague, that in 2023, 2023 rather, there was a peacekeeping mission where different leaders in the continent actually went to Moscow and Kyiv, trying to facilitate some sort of peace there. But also on the other side, the president mentioned that, or rather President Zelensky mentioned that it's not easy to basically have an agreement of ceasefire with President Putin, because they said that previously he infringed the agreement that they had of ceasefire. But over and above, we do know again that at the center of this, President Ramaphosa, in many respects, he'd want to see himself as somebody who will negotiate this peace, simply because you would know that South Africa is part of the BRICS bloc, where Russia is part of that. So in a way, it does give South Africa a more upper hand in a way in terms of facilitating some sort of peace in this war that we currently seeing at this point in time. But again, but at the center of this, Layo, it goes without saying that the issues of ceasefire, it does look like we're still far from it. But what President Zelensky is doing is that he says that when Ukraine is isolated, he feels that Russia has more power to actually continue with the bombing. But when he says that, but when they have more friends on their side, they tend to have more courage in a way. But you would know also that the likes of the United States of America that funds the Ukraine with weapons the relationship has gone down the hill, whereby it does look like it's not repairable with President Trump at the helm. They even paused the giving them military, giving them weapons. So it puts them in a very much precarious position. So for now, the President Ramaphosa says that he had a call with President Putin, as you rightly mentioned, but he didn't give us details as to what was really discussed in that phone call. But also, we do know that President Trump has not made a fuss, Layo, about Zelensky coming to South Africa. But yeah, we head into a very interesting time ahead. But in all of this, Layo, we're praying for peace between the two countries.
Indeed, Innocent. Thank you so much, our correspondent in Johannesburg, Innocent Simosa.
Thank you so much, colleague.
The ECOWAS Council of Ministers have held a meeting in Accra reiterating their commitment to regional solidarity and also discussing contingency plans after Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger officially withdrew from the bloc. The leaders of the West African nations, including Ghanaian Foreign Minister and Nigeria's Foreign Minister, they are of the opinion, they say that the organization rather is resolved to keeping the regional bloc alive. Meanwhile, Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tuga, speaks of the exhibition of the spirit of solidarity in addressing critical issues that the bloc is facing.
Has allowed us to address critical issues affecting our community and make decisions that will significantly impact the effectiveness of our regional organization. Your diligence and dedication in analyzing these issues have been exemplary and commendable. Furthermore, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the ECOWAS Commission and its team for providing the essential background information and working materials to ensure the success of this meeting.
And that's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.